All right, John. John, where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, a little neighborhood called Rose Park.
And tell me about your family. You had mom and dad?
Yeah, but my parents were separated since I was real little, so I guess I grew up in two different households.
Oh, I see. After your parents divorced.
hmm
How would you describe your childhood?
Uh, uh, like, I'm trying to think of a word for like turmoil. I guess I'm traumatic. I don't know,
Chaotic?
but it wasn't all bad though. I don't want it to sound, you know. So, and I guess the reason I say that is because, like as you can see, I'm white. Um, but like I said, I grew up in a neighborhood called Rose Park. Rose Park, when I was growing up, was a predominantly Latino neighborhood. I think once we hit like around 2010, the estimate was like 60 or 70%. So they made up the majority of the neighborhood. There was a really large gang presence in the neighborhood, which is usually uncommon. Most white kids don't have their neighborhood tattooed on their wrist. So
This is Salt Lake City.
the Salt Lake City, yeah,
You wouldn't think there'd be hardcore gangs in Salt Lake City.
absolutely not. But at the same time, I mean, I know people that are in prison for murder now, or aggravated assaults, or it's all sorts of shit. Like,
I guess it goes on everywhere.
yeah, definitely. And the bigger the population, the more it's gonna happen. I mean, Salt Lake City isn't the smallest place on the planet. It's not like it's some small town, but when the 80s hit, like when the gang thing hit in California, it just spread all across the country, and we were one of the places that got hit.
So you got involved in that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider myself a gang member, but a gang associate because I was always associated with gang members. And even, being around them has led me to get in trouble before, even where our local police force made me hold up a little whiteboard with my nickname and what set I was hanging out with. So
And you went through high school? You made it through?
I did. I actually graduated from an alternative high school, but I made it. And I have a little bit of college under my belt too.
What kind of trouble did you get into being an associate of these?
We pulled over on suspicion of a drive-by shooting, like stolen property. We had gang units. One time, my friend was the person who was on this necklace, he's passed away now, but he was getting in a fight with another individual, and gang unit happened to be rolling by as the fight was happening. So they chased us into the house, and that ended up with my friend getting arrested, a dad getting deported, a family being broken up. It was crazy, and it was all within a matter of minutes.
And how did this childhood that you had affect you now that you're an adult?
Um, I wish it didn't, but in reality, it led to, the trauma led to, and it's not just this, but other things from my past. It led to a lot of drug use. I have been an on-again, off-again heroin user since 2013. And in the past year, or the past probably 6 months, it escalated to fentanyl. So, once you quit getting high from heroin, you switch over to the next best thing.
So that's still something you deal with?
Yeah, but my whole reason for coming to California was to get myself clean. The only clean time that I ever had, I basically ended up homeless in Denver, Colorado, and was forced to get myself back on my feet if I wanted to survive. And I was able to get it down for a little bit, but I relapsed because I got really, really depressed and I didn't understand what was going on. Later, I would end up finding out that I was actually, I was bipolar, and that was my reason for relapsing. And part of the reason I've struggled so bad with substance abuse and being on and off homeless at different times in my life.
Yeah, that combination makes it rough.
Yeah, it does.
Drug addicted, bipolar, homeless.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, just like you said, you put all three together, and that's just a ticking time bomb. So at this point, I want to get clean. I was literally living in my mom's basement, just using drugs. She was just frustrated every day. She literally didn't know what to do with me. She didn't want to throw me out on the streets because she knows what goes on out there, and she knows that I've been out there before. But at the same time, she doesn't want me living under her roof, using drugs in the house, and just being nobody, I guess.
It's hard for a parent.
It is definitely, and that's one thing I think all drug users take for granted is how hard it is on their parents, on why their parents might kick them out or why they may not You know, it's your parents don't kick you out because they don't love you. They're doing it because they love you. You know, they're separating themselves from you because they love you so much they can't bear to watch you self-destruct.
Yeah, it's a really complicated situation
It is.
because enabling kicks in faster than you can
Yeah.
recognize it.
And like I said, my mom, like, you know, she was just trying to do the right thing. She didn't want me to be out in the streets. You know, in Utah, it gets really cold in the winters. Homeless people die every winter because of, you know, the snow and how freezing it gets. Like, it's, you know, it's not something it's easy to deal with. So, you know, and like I said, she was just stuck in between. Am I going to let him continue to use under my roof, or am I going to kick him out and let this be the final straw? And so this time I decided to make the decision and say, well, I'll figure it out for myself.
How old are you?
I'm 29.
29. So you're going to stay out here and you're going to try to
Yes.
get clean.
So yeah, the whole point is you know, because as I've been around today, it's not, I've been to LA before. I have family out here. So that's part of the reason I chose out here, is because I have somebody out here that, you know, is kind of scouting and trying to help me along with my getting clean. But, you know, like you can look at Skid Row and there's, you know, many a tent filled with people right now that are, you know, just in a very vicious cycle. But I came out here because it's not like there aren't programs in Utah. It's just the programs in Utah are very, very minuscule compared to like what is out here and the money that is invested out here. Like, they are really trying to get people off the streets out here, but it's only if you want the help. So I decided I'm going to take the help.
What's been the roughest part of your journey here?
Honestly, just knowing that I'm back on my own, but I'm on my own in a different sense. I'm not just relying on myself. I'm on my own, starting from below bottom. I'm starting out from the streets and will just basically be working myself up. So, you know, I brought some methadone. I basically was taking my methadone from the clinic and spitting it out so I could save it literally. So I snuck it on the plane so I could just make sure that while I was here, I could use it to taper. So that way I'm not throwing up in the streets and just, you know, wasting, like, you know, literally just, I would end up going back into it. So I'm just trying to put myself back together.
Do you have a program to go to yet?
No. So I've looked at a couple things. I think first and foremost is going to be housing, whether that be temporary, permanent, and then I want to get into a program. But I think that should be first and foremost, because I don't think I'll be able to focus too much if I'm running around on Skid Row or running around downtown. So
Yeah, it's easy to get sucked down.
yeah, it is 100%. And it's just, you see it, like you look outside the door and it is there. It is there. Drugs are there if you want them. And one thing I've learned is this is the 6th state I've lived in. I mean, I've tried to outrun this a lot. And everywhere I've been, drugs are everywhere. Like, it literally doesn't matter what you're looking for. You will find it in small towns in Montana with 700 people.
The smaller the town, the more out of control it is.
Dude, you'll find an 8-ball of cocaine in a town of 700 people where you don't think it could make it from Mexico, and it made it right there.
Yeah, it's
You
the
know what I'm
entire
saying?
country.
Yeah, and so, you have to really, like, it's one of those things you have to want it, and I'm just at a point in my life where I don't know how to, like, describe it, but now, more than ever, it's like a hunger, I guess, if you want to put it that way, because I don't want to be 40 years old telling war stories. I don't want to heed somebody not to go down the path that I've gone down. I feel like we should just have enough people mess up, and then we should just realize that that's not a way to go, man. You know, like opiates. You know, we learned with the opiate crisis, like we learned that you can't overprescribe opiates. You can't give 15-year-olds painkillers for, getting a tooth pulled. You can't do stuff like that because it leads to a hectic situation that there's no easy way to solve. And yeah, I was one of those people that got those prescriptions way early, so we were abusing painkillers in high school, so it was nothing new when I finally tried heroin. I tried heroin at 17. I didn't actually get addicted till 19 because I had only tried it a couple times. It wasn't until I buckled down and for whatever reason decided this is the drug I'm gonna use. But
what do you think got you into this cycle of addiction?
I'm gonna say heed this, raving, because what raving does is you take drugs like ecstasy, LSD, party drugs. And what it does is it makes drugs seem like they're harmless. It gives you a false sense because you're like, wait, I took that, and you're like, I might have felt a little bad the next day, but you're like, nothing super harmful came from it. So it gives you this misleading idea that you can try other drugs without consequence. And the thing is, drugs like cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, those drugs have consequences. Even though it may be slimmer with something like MDMA, I wouldn't say there's no consequence to it because it all seems to lead to the same path, if that makes sense. And I've heard other people come on here and say the same thing where they started raving, they were doing mushrooms, they did this, and then it turned into a full-blown drug addiction because they kind of I'm trying to think they okayed it in their head. It seemed okay at the time, I guess.
Did you start with pot?
Yeah, definitely. I started really young too, like 11.
So you could almost say the same thing about pot.
Oh, 100%. I think
it opens the door.
Yes, I think marijuana is a gateway drug. I think people think marijuana is a lot more benign than it is. I think all drugs really have a negative impact and can have a seriously negative impact on your life. Because one thing is, I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say I don't smoke marijuana every day. I do, but does it inhibit me from certain things? Yeah, it slows me down and it does hold me back. It doesn't hold me back nearly as much as other drugs, but yeah, I wouldn't suggest using drugs if you wanna have like a decent life. I think it's the best way to put it.
I've never smoked pot, so I don't even know. But the one thing I see from everyone I interview and know just in general outside of this project is a lot of people don't like dealing with rough emotions. They don't like dealing with the anger, the anxiety, the depression, and the pot seems to help.
Yeah, it seems to.
And part of maturing as an adult, as a human, is dealing with those emotions so they don't affect you so strongly anymore. You can't just escape with pot every time you get these emotions because you'll never mature.
Super smart. Like Mark, you just pointed something out, and that's realistically, we've heard of things like that where they say that using marijuana keeps your brain at like that of like someone who's in elementary school or in middle school. I've heard things like that where your emotional maturity is like younger than someone it should be, but that's true because if you're not learning the coping skills on how to deal with these problems, and I will say that first and foremost, I'm somebody who suffers from mental illness and I never learned those coping skills. My coping skills were from watching people beat the shit out of people or watch people try to murder other people or watch people use drugs while people are trying to hurt other people. And I mean, just to be honest, it's not even an escape because the drug ends much sooner than you think it does and reality comes right back in.
And your circumstances usually get harder as you
they exacerbate
keep escaping everything.
Yeah, 100%.
And not dealing with the problems.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm even saying that even now when I use marijuana, and I still think it's harmful to me, and I still think it's holding me back. And I'm literally looking at you today saying, I'm not ready to quit it though, but I'm ready to quit fentanyl, but I'm not ready to quit marijuana. You hear that? Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like why? It almost sounds pointless. It's like why not just throw it all away and say, hey, it's time to start anew. But I think that once I get into a program, maybe they'll help get me on the right track or maybe on a better train of thought because that's actually, that's one thing that my mom pointed out a lot is that she's like, your thinking isn't right. And the reality is, if I've been using drugs pretty much my whole life, my thinking isn't right and I'm not able to correctly deal with emotions. And the thing is it does perpetuate this cycle of me becoming homeless, me using more drugs, me lashing out at people. It does. It perpetuates the cycle. It makes it much worse. I mean, understand that I just hopped off the plane and said, I have nowhere to go. I have a little bit of money. I really don't have anything.
And you contacted me and said you want to do an interview.
Exactly. So I contacted you. I've looked at a couple of the homeless shelters and, we're basically going to see what happens because I know how homeless shelters work. It's first come, first serve. So I'll be basically, going and see if I can find a place to.
What age did you start using drugs or pot, whatever?
Okay, so marijuana at 11, but my actual drug use past that really started to kick in high school. Early high school, I started trying the more benign drugs. But then as we got into
14, 15?
Yeah, once we got into sophomore year, I was already just ready to take whatever.
Yeah, it's a common story.
Yeah, by the time I was 17,
to start so early.
Using hard drugs. So by the time, because I used cocaine at 15, so never mind, 15. Yeah, 15 was when even my mom looked at me and said, I've opened Pandora's box was the best way for her to describe it because she found out my involvement with gangs. She found out my drug use was she thought it was marijuana, which a lot of people think is, pretty harmless. But then she found out, oh, it's past that. But, you got to keep that under wraps. She doesn't understand that I'm getting OxyContin from a girl who's stealing it from her dad who has cancer. and he has now passed away. And I mean, I don't know where she is today, but I just know that's the story.
What's your biggest regret so far in your life?
Drugs, man. Like, hands down, because the thing is, I couldn't control moving to Rose Park when I was younger. I couldn't control the friends that I met, because literally I was kind of a nobody when I grew up. I was not somebody people want to be friends with. So I had to I had to take what I could get. But if there's one thing that was in my control, it was my use of illicit substances, or it doesn't matter if they were legal or illicit, it doesn't matter. Just drug use in general, because that's been my biggest downfall.
You say that's the most important thing you've learned in your life?
100%, because it's like kryptonite to me. It may not be like that for everybody else, but looking down here, it seems like it's like that for a lot of people. So, and you know, now that around the country, it's not just here, but we've seen, you know, a lot of places basically lessen the, you know, the crime for possessing drugs and lessen other criminal offenses. You kind of see people take advantage. Like, you see people like, oh, I don't go to jail anymore, so I can steal from whatever store I want. Like, oh, I don't go to jail for having drugs anymore, I can have more drugs now. Like, you just see that, and I mean, we thought it was gonna do one thing, and it did the opposite, you know? Like, we did these lenient policies to help people, and it turns out they might have done the complete opposite.
All right, John, thank you so much for sharing your story,
Thank you
and I wish you all the luck in the world
very much.
out here. Thank you, man.